Welcome to the Contract Podcast. I'm your host, Amber Simpson. Our last conversation on neurodivergence explored what inclusion feels and looks like from the inside for the employee, the team, the manager. Today, I want to zoom out, way out, because the guest I have with me today has spent his career not just making individual workplaces more inclusive, but he's been helping to build the systems, the standards, and the infrastructure that make inclusion possible at scale. Anthony Pacilio is the Chief Inclusion Officer at F90 Solutions, a nationally and internationally recognized expert in neurodiverse employment, co-author of the industry standard Autism at Work Playbook, a lecturer at Cornell University School of International Labor Relations, and the recipient of the Adam Havner Award from the Autism Society. He was previously Global Head of Autism at Work at JP Chase and Vice President of Neurodiverse Solutions at CAI, two of the most ambitious and well-documented neurodiversity employment programs in the world. Anthony, welcome to the Contract Podcast.
Well, thank you, Amber. I appreciate you having me on. I can't wait to get into it. There's so much to talk about.
Absolutely. So let's do that. And I want to first start at the, that way out, zoomed out level. Let's talk about infrastructure, because I think the most common failure mode that organizations kind of fall into, they want to do this work, right? But don't know where to start. So they may pilot something, it doesn't scale, and then it quietly just disappears. But you've built programs that lasted and grew. So walk our listeners through what a real systemic neurodiverse employment program actually requires.
Yeah, so great thought and question. First, you got to kind of get the buy-in, right? And that's at a senior leader level. I think I was lucky, and my colleagues were lucky at JP Chase, where the senior leaders came in and they were the ones who were kind of advocating for a program like this. It's so much easier top down than grassroots up. And we tell everybody who have ERG programs and BRGs and all the RGs that, if you can get a senior leader to buy into this, that starts the infrastructure. But that infrastructure of saying, yes, we should do something, that's just the first minimal piece. The second piece is the education, is the training of not only the senior leaders, but the managers, the employees, people that are working side by side with neurodivergent professionals. And the funny thing about the infrastructure is most companies and their employees are already working next to somebody who is neurodiverse, who has ADHD, who has autism. They just don't know it. So what programs are in place currently within your organization that even help facilitate some of those things? So the infrastructure itself has got to be, okay, we're going to do this. We got to get education and training, before somebody, butt in seat on day one. We need to have things kind of nailed down as best you can. And that includes like environmental surveys, right? If something's too bright or, they're close to a window and there's a large distraction, like these minor things, they take away from the productivity of individuals. So if we don't think about these little things, which are huge things to the neurodiverse professional, then we're kind of not doing the program as such.
Thank you for that. And you mentioned something that is so very true. We're already, amongst our colleagues, someone who may be neurodiverse and we don't know it, right? In fact, there is the numbers are really staggering. We talked about this in our previous episode, but that neurodiverse teams, even though they're 30% more productive than neurotypical ones and typically make fewer errors, unemployment for autistic adults runs as high as 85%. And that represents a global economic cost of about 1.5 trillion in lost productivity. That is a significant gap. And so getting back a little bit to the systems and structures that you have built, give us a little bit of a sneak peek or behind the curtain understanding of, let's say, JP Morgan. That's a huge organization. Tell us a little bit more about that work.
Yeah, so it started back in 2015 or 16, and we started with a small pod of folks, 4 individuals doing quality assurance work. And listen, we didn't get it right the first time. We they have, I say we because I used to work there, but they have gotten it super straight at this point. One of the most well-respected programs in the world. We started with those 4 individuals, and we kind of put them in a conference room by themselves. The lighting was low, and we thought, we were doing the right thing. And then, a few weeks later, they're like, well, how come we're stuck in here and we're not out with the people and our teammates and all that good stuff? So, red flag number one to us, we screwed that up. So you learn from your mistakes, right? And
Hmm.
we were one of the pioneers at that time, and with Microsoft and SAP and Dell, and you can go on and on with some other companies. But we started out with those 4 people, and we had to get it right. We made not a lot of mistakes, but the training and education that we talked about, we needed to make sure that the people that were sitting side by side with those individuals understood those individuals and some of the things that go along with being neurodiverse. And half the time it's invisible, right? You don't know. But if somebody has Tourette's and things, if something has kind of come out and things get a little squirrely, and you're like, well, how do I handle that? We were almost were learning on the fly. And that's why the autism work playbook kind of arrived as well from ourselves and some other companies. We can get into that in a little bit, but going from those 4 people and setting the stage, and we made sure that they had all the tools necessary. The productivity was, and I'm sure you've seen, it was like 90 to 140% more productive than neurotypical folks who are, working there 10 or 15 years. That's
Amazing.
crazy production,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And I think once you get that and the leaders see that productivity is there, that's when it kind of permeates throughout the business. The
Hmm.
spider web goes, and other leaders within the organization see, and they're like, "What is this?" And oh my gosh, uh, can you bring that to risk and compliance versus QA and
Hmm.
whatever the department may be? So, and that's how the program really grew. It grew organically, but we also made sure that we provided updates to the entire firm, via the intranet about
Hmm.
what we're doing and some of the specific things that were going on within our space. And, it's a new program and whatnot. And it has evolved, meaning companies now maybe not having an autism at work program. It's embedded into what they do from a hiring perspective. And there's a lot of things that we could talk about in that. But I
Yeah.
think we just gave ourselves the opportunity to make mistakes and apologize for those mistakes and learn from those mistakes. So by the time I left in 2021, we had 300 folks who were on the spectrum, 10 different countries, and 40 different job roles, which speaks to the depth and the breadth of the talent that is sometimes untapped. If you don't know where to look for it, you might not find it.
Absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit about one of the outcomes or outputs of that great work was that you referenced the Autism at Work playbook, right? You mentioned that you co-authored that with Microsoft, SAP, EY, JP Morgan Chase, and Washington University. And this playbook is widely considered the industry standard for neurodiverse hiring programs. So for an organization that's just starting out,
Yes.
what are some non-negotiable elements that really have to be in place for a program to work?
Yeah, well, the one thing is they should probably, whether you're a small, medium-sized or large organization, that playbook is amazing. They've actually made a couple of updates to it since we kind of went out and built that.
Mhm.
Um, but I think the non-negotiable things are um, how you interview,
Right.
um, the questions that you ask, your job requisition that you're putting out there. What we found when we were creating all of this, the requisition would list 400 different things that a person needed. But really, did that job really need all of those things? What was happening is we were kind of taking out some of the folks who could do the core responsibilities because they saw I needed, great communication skills and able
Yeah.
to present to senior leadership when the job was a QA analyst who probably wouldn't do those sorts of things.
Hmm.
Um, that's probably the first non-negotiable. I think the second non-negotiable would be, um, and if I think back of what we went through, is the hiring managers having enough knowledge about individuals with neurodiversity that they could see through somebody who is not making extreme eye contact during an interview.
Right.
Or, if it was in person, they didn't shake their hand like you're supposed to. If we've come to believe that you're supposed to do that, you have to see through that and ask the questions, have these questions ready, but ask the questions about their ability, not what
Hmm.
are they going to do in 5 years or where do they see themselves. Listen, I don't know where I see myself in, next week. It could change, right? So some unfair questions in there. You got to talk about what they've done. If you're
Yeah.
looking at the resume, you can go through all the little things and volunteer, and that's great. That makes a
Hmm.
well-rounded person. But somebody who is neurodivergent may not like to go and volunteer, so they might have limited information on the resume for that. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, you got to ask about the job. That's what they're there for, and that's why they kind of get, and I'm struggling for the word, but they won't even apply for the job.
Yeah.
Uh,
Counting
it,
themselves out for before even, like you said,
yeah,
going for
it-
it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's even higher in the
Hmm.
female population.
Yeah.
Yes, so there's studies done saying, okay, if you're a female and you look at these job descriptions, even one thing done, not even applying.
Yeah. I, I, I was just having a similar conversation with some colleagues about that. And that's something that's really, I think, germane to this conversation about neurodivergence. When you look at the shift that is happening in the workplace, it used to be all about credentials. So
Yeah,
how many letters do you have behind your name? It's shifting. And this is, I'd say, would dare say, a truly foundational, fundamental shift to skills.
yes,
And so it's really important what you just called out, uh, how we, as if we're hiring leaders or in recruitment, rethinking, and even the job posting itself.
yes,
How do you focus on skills-based interviews, ways to really contextualize and anchor to allow all candidates, but particularly it would be helpful and directive for those that may be neurodiverse to have that anchor in my skills and to be able to showcase that and not be bound by other kind of social mores or
yes,
cultural mores that don't necessarily track directly to the job. And then that way we're not counting folks out.
yes.
But once they're part of the organization, provide some of that infrastructure and supports buddy systems of a variety of ways, right?
Yeah,
To help that acculturation piece. But we don't want to lose the wonderful talent that someone can certainly add, to the conversation, to the team, to the organization.
yeah. And so everything that you and I are talking about, Amber, like job postings and
Mhm.
interviews and all this other good stuff, this this isn't just for neurodivergent individuals, right? This is universal design. If our
Yes.
HR organizations, could come to terms with doing things a little bit differently, being a little bit more open, um, you know, with the advent of some other technology that are screening out people on the front end before they even get to talk to them. I know
Hmm.
you know where I'm going with that one,
Yep.
but
Yep.
it's if we do this the right way, it doesn't benefit just neurodivergent individuals. It helps the entire population of your employment.
It really does. But I want to push on this a little bit because we're living in a time where our current political and legal climate around DEI,
Yes.
specializing, focusing on different groups, and accessibility is a category that falls under, DEI. And there's this trend of rolling back of programs, legal scrutiny. We talk about it now in terms of risk mitigation. Everyone is kind of like afraid. But as you mentioned, all the things that we've been talking about is good for everyone. It creates a space and place for all employees, no matter what, the ability, divergence, whatever it is, if
Yeah.
how you want to term it, it creates a space that allows everyone to bring their skills and their talents to fore. And so, when you think about neurodiversity or neurodiversity employment, it's both a diversity initiative and a disability accommodation issue,
Mhm.
if really and truly. And so, how do you advise organizations right now to navigate that complexity? Because it has become a very, very charged, let's say,
Yeah.
area. How do they continue to do this work that is obviously very important, right?
Yep.
In a way that's legally sound
Sure.
and organizationally sustainable.
Yeah. So when I talk to companies, and again, large, small, medium sized, and they're like, well, listen, with the climate that we are currently in, how do we not get around it, but we actually do like these programs. There's a massive benefit in the ROI, and it's not just the ROI from a monetary standpoint, but there's a human ROI to it as
Absolutely.
well.
Yep.
Um, the advice that I give to them, and they've already started to do this, is they kind of renamed what they were doing previously, right?
Hmm.
So some things that were kind of ancillary and it was a program is now, it's not buried, but it's kind of moved under a different part of the organization. It's been renamed. A department is whatever you want to call it at this point. Companies are still doing this. The questions that we ask when we're going in and talking to these folks is, where is it? What
Hmm.
Who is the person now? Is it the same person that it was before, or did you
Hmm.
have to completely move on and just kind of build a new one? So the kind of the piece that gets us the most traction is, so you've done something with the program, you still want it to be able to provide this diverse talent, right? Um, are you company by putting it somewhere else? Is the legal ramifications for you that large that you can say, I I I can't put that out there is out there, but we've embedded it somewhere different. I'll give you an example. So, Disability In is kind of the largest conference, in the U.S. slash
Hmm.
world, that brings together organizations who have disability or accessibility programs. That brings together people of all races, genders, invisible disabilities, visible disabilities. I cannot tell you the amount of Fortune 100 companies that go to this,
Hmm.
right? That have a booth, that have a program. So when we go talk to these companies, we're saying, are you still going to do that because you did it last year? Now, there's some companies that have fallen off, and we try to kind of nudge them forward and get them back on track. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. But all those companies who are there every single year, and they're making sure that people have an opportunity to go to work, right?
Hmm.
Those companies are the ones that we want to continue to work with. Sometimes, you got to scratch people off the list. It's unfortunate, but it happens. We're in a weird time.
Yeah. Yeah. But like you said, this is necessary work. If we're going to be truly serious and intentional, right, about making sure that we're building organizations that have the best talent, that means that we have to be intentional about looking for that talent, about attracting that talent, about retaining that talent, integrating that talent. And we know from research that diverse teams diversity in all of those, you know, aspects, diversity of thought, diversity of experience makes stronger teams. And so you're so right that this work goes beyond any type of naming convention or what have you, but really
Yeah.
it is about how do you ensure that the right systems are in place and supports are in place to create an environment where the best talent can be attracted and retained for what you're doing. And so I love that. But so let's go a little bit further. You are this recognized expert in this space, and we want to look forward for our listeners out there that may be sitting in HR organizations. Maybe they're leaders. They could be the CHRO or the CEO. You know reference that as well. Let's talk a little bit about what needs to be changed or what needs to remain or grow, be amplified if they're sitting in those spaces. For instance, let's say it's a CHRO or an HR leader that's listening to you today, and they've been wanting to start this work, but they don't know where to begin. What's the first call they should make and the first question they should ask, or maybe the first move that sets everything in motion?
Yeah, I think they gotta, if they're looking to do something like this, they gotta look internally first to see
Okay.
what they have already established, right? Is there BRGs or ERGs out there that are doing this? Get a pulse check of your
Mm,
company.
mm-hmm.
Some companies kind of do, you know, opt-ins, or if you have like 2 times a year, they'll say, hey, listen, like a reporting status, they could look at those numbers, meaning if somebody has a disability, they can see kind of the numbers if they fluctuate, go up or down, self-reporting.
Yeah.
It's not necessary, but they got to look at the data that they have. Where is their talent? Where is it located? The next thing they have to do is call someone like myself or
Mm-hmm.
F90 Solutions and say, hey, listen, we think we got something. We don't really know how to do it. And could you help us kind of wrangle everybody in and see if we can do a program or embed it in our recruiting and our HR organization? That's kind of really the first step. It takes no time. It takes an initial call. We get the pulse check of the company. Like, we're going to ask some, pointed questions like, what are you doing now? Do you have an accessibility team? How is the onboarding process? Does everybody feel like they're getting the right technology and to do their jobs? I mean, just general questions. And that's really how it begins.
Okay. And as we go further down that kind of train of thought, what are some systemic, maybe policy level, infrastructure level type changes that would help folks to think about, if again, being very intentional in this talent acquisition and retention? How do we go from a few to hundreds to that? How do we really do that? What are some of those like pieces of advice there in that level?
Yeah, so we've been talking about that for a very long time, since we've started this, right? And you
Mhm.
mentioned earlier the 85% underemployment or unemployment rate
Yeah.
of neurodivergent individuals. Um, we have tried to institute some policies that are kind of general helpful things for people who are disabled. And we've taken some of those to Congress. There's actually a caucus about it.
Okay.
And that's at a government scale.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
and it's very difficult to get those programs kind of policy is approved. Now you go back to the company and you're like, all right, what can we do internally
Mm-hmm.
to change the way that we do this? Well, I think it starts with your HR folks and your senior leaders going, all right, we do need to take a look at our numbers. You can't, there's here in the United States, the whole quota thing that
Right.
gets thrown out the window. That's we're
Right.
not in
Absolutely. We're
a
not
different
talking about
country,
that.
and we can talk
Right.
about that.
We're talking about data,
But we
just,
need to
being informed.
ensure that
Mhm.
yeah, we have it. Yeah, yes. So the diversification of your talent is kind of there. You can't make wholesale changes to the way that you do business. And I don't know that we don't want to change the entire culture of your company, but you do need to institute parameters around hiring. And whether that's going, okay, we have a whole pool of applicants wherever they come from, but we need to make sure that we pull some from the neurodiversity career connector, or somewhere else that has a different set of talent, whether it's veteran talent, what it could be, whatever. But those policies need to be in place. I mean, from here, here, we throw them in a pile. No one knows who they are and what they are. May the best, talent win. But half the time, we're not going to those sites, and those people aren't applying.
True.
So that's
True.
kind of a policy that would help.
I love that because again, we're talking about looking at internal systems and how do you broaden and strengthen those systems. And by doing that, by extension, you will go to these different, sources to have diverse talent presented at the table. Now, for the neurodivergent professional who may be listening to you today, listening to this podcast, they may be struggling to find a company that sees and values what they bring. What do you want them to know about what's changing and where they should be looking?
Yeah. So listen, I'm neurodivergent myself. I tell everybody this in speeches and keynotes and all that good stuff. I have extreme social anxiety disorder. I have depression. I'm okay with it. It takes me a little time to go do things a little bit differently than some other folks. But for the people that are like me, maybe have ADHD or OCD, whatever it may be, companies today are, I would say, a little better than what they were 10 years ago. We've moved the needle just a little bit. Um, we need to go a lot further. We're getting there. But when you're looking for a company, I always research, well, do they have an ERG or a BRG, or do they have some sort of program in place for diversity, whatever that is? Like, I go to their company website and I'll type in neurodiversity, or I'll type in disability. I want to see what they actually have. And then when you're talking to those companies, it's not always about them interviewing you. It's also about you asking the questions back to them. Like, don't see that you have an accessibility team, and I need a screen reader because I'm low vision. Um, do you supply those things? And if they say no, we don't have any of those things, I take a second to go back internally and be like, okay, maybe this might not be the company for me. I want to know that companies that I'm applying for are all inclusive, whatever that means, right? Race, gender, disability, all that good stuff. So I'm telling you, do a little research on your end,
Yeah.
but you can always, contact me. I'll help you do it. It doesn't take that long for me to kind of tell you, because I know most of the companies that they're good, or they need a little help, or they haven't started yet.
Yeah. Well, this is just amazing because what you have built and what you continue to build, Anthony, is proof that this isn't just about good values, it's good strategy, right? And organizations that get this right are going to have to are going to have better access to a talent pool that their competitors are still overlooking, right? We already talked about how the teams that include neurodivergent employees have less errors, more accurate. There's so many wonderful things that they bring to the team. So I want to thank you for spending time not only in the space, spending your entire professional life being an advocate for researching and coming up with solutions, real solutions, right, for both individuals and organizations. And also for spending some of that time with us today on the Contract Podcast. So for everyone listening, know that you can connect with Anthony. He has invited you several times. You can connect with him on LinkedIn at his profile at Anthony Pacilio. Also, if you want to go deep on best practices, the Autism at Work Playbook is available through Disability N at disabilityn.org and the Neurodiversity Career Connector. It's the vetted job marketplace for neurodivergent candidates is at neurodiversitycareerconnector.org. Each of those resources is absolutely worth bookmarking. And before I let you go, Anthony, this is a question that I tend to ask all of my interviewees. What is one piece of advice, one thing that you want our listeners to walk away with today?
Yeah, that's a great question. My advice is always there are people just like you everywhere in the world. There are people that want to give opportunities to others. And I say you need to go for it. 1,000 times you submitted a resume. Well, that 1,001st time, somebody's going to go, that Anthony's a great person for this organization. Do not stop. There's other people out here like myself and you, Amber, that are trying to make this community big and whole and fruitful. You got to rely on our resources as well. So you're always welcome to reach out to people just like us.
I love it. And on that note, we'll stop there. But I want to thank you again, Anthony, for being with us. You are just phenomenal, and I want to encourage all of our listeners to find you because your work is vital to our just the diversity in the workplace. It's something that is precious. It is a competitive advantage, and it is truly human leadership. So again, thank you for all you do. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Contract Podcast.
Thank you, Amber.
Oh, of course. Thank you. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram, and also go to thecontractpodcast.com, or you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to catch you next time. Thanks again for tuning in.